In the last video, we made our LineString simplify method return a new line string. But in order to make our tests work, we also changed them to use the getCoordinates method to be able to count on this. However, wouldn't it be much nicer if we could just call count on result1 directly? And of course, this is possible in PHP by defining the Countable interface on an object. So that's what we're going to do in this installment. First of all, we need to update our stubs file. We can just add implement Countable here. The Countable interface itself calls a method count, so we need to define that as well. And that returns an integer. Now let's call make. And you will see that we get an error, because now to register class geospatial GeoJSON LineString, we need to pass in our Countable interface. You can also see that it's in the wrong namespace, so we need to fix that first. The word Countable, of course, is now part of the namespace geospatial GeoJSON, and we don't want that, so we need to specify the slash to get to the root namespace. Now let's try that again. And now indeed it just expects Countable here. In order to pass in the Countable class entry, we need to figure out where to find that in PHP itself. With this line we grab for C Countable. We also redirect all standard error to standard out to be able to grab further on. We then grab for class entry to wait out lots of other things where C Countable is used, and we also remove all the binary file comparisons. This provides is that zend/zendinterface.h defines our class entry as extern, so we need to include this before we can use this. With this information, we can now fix our register method. Let's try that again. So this compiles now. What happens if we run the tests? We now get lots of failures. We get failures, and it says that it cannot find the symbol zgeospatial GeoJSON LineString.count, which makes sense because we haven't added that yet. That's our next step. We'll add it at the end of the file. As count doesn't accept any argument, we need to make sure that we parse for that correctly too, to be able to get the right errors in case people do pass an argument. In a method, we need to read our property points again. This is similar as before. We can actually just copy and paste it, that's easier. Now, we don't know for sure whether this is actually an array, so let's make sure that it is. Because we defined the property as an array, we can probably use assert for this. The chance that we actually have an error here means that there is a bug in the PHP engine, which we don't expect to happen. And if it does, we'd rather know immediately. Now we have asserted that it is an array, we can use zend hashnum elements to return a value. The macro to returning an integer is called return long. We also need to use hash of because zend hashnum elements works on a hash table and not on an array. Hash of gets the right portion out of the array variable. And that should be our function. Now let's modify our test case as well. But first I'll try to compile this to make sure that we did it right. That seems to work. Now let's update our test. We should be able to call count directly in result 1 and 2 now, so let us do that. We should also update our test file name. As you can see, this now works. But we should probably test one other thing as well. Because you can also just call the method directly itself. We'll add that as well. This should give the same results really. Of course, we need to expect this set twice now too. We can now run the tests. And this still passes too. I probably should actually split it up in 2 different tests to be consistent, so let me do that. I will rename the test to Countable so that it is clear that it is for the interface. Or rather, I will copy it so I can adjust the behavior in the file that we already have. This first one is now for the direct count method. That should work. Calling the count methods is something that PHP internally would do if you call count on the object itself, but there's no reason why you can't call count directly. This is still the same, so we're all good. And let's run the test one more time to make sure that it all works. And there we go, we've added the Countable interface so that you can call count on line strings directly to get the number of coordinate pairs out of that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.